A billionaire sat alone in a small-town cafe for 4 weeks. Nobody spoke to him. Nobody wanted him there. They thought he was there to cause trouble in their town. But the truth? He was searching for the last place his son smiled before he died. And when one waitress finally said 2 words in his language, this powerful man broke down and cried. What happened next didn't just change his life. It changed an entire community. Stay with me, because this story will remind you why kindness is the most powerful language we speak. Welcome to Voice of Granny. While you are here, please hit the subscribe button and comment your view on the story and where you're watching from. Have you ever felt invisible in a room full of people? That's exactly how it was for William Zhang every single morning at Rosie's Cafe. Picture this, a small breakfast spot in Cedar Falls, Montana. The kind of place where everybody knows everybody. Red leather booths that have seen better days. Coffee that's been brewing since 5 in the morning. The smell of bacon and fresh pancakes filling the air. And in the corner booth, sitting perfectly still, was a man who didn't belong. William Zhang. Back in Beijing, he was one of the most powerful real estate developers in Asia. His company built skyscrapers that touched the clouds. Shopping centers that stretched for city blocks. Luxury hotels where presidents and celebrities stayed. He was the kind of man who could make a single phone call and change the skyline of an entire city. But here in Cedar Falls, Montana, he was just the foreign guy in the expensive suit that nobody wanted to talk to. For 4 weeks straight, William had been coming to Rosie's Cafe. Same time every morning. 7 o'clock sharp. Same order every time. Black coffee, no sugar. Same generous tip left on the table. $20 for a $3 cup of coffee. And yet nobody really saw him. Oh, they noticed him, sure. How could they not? A Chinese man in a $1,000 suit sitting in a cafe where most folks wore jeans and work boots. The whispers started the moment he walked in. The sideways glances. The conversations that stopped when he got too close. What's he doing here? They'd mutter to each other. Probably checking out the town to buy up all our buildings. These big city developers, they come in and ruin everything. William understood more English than people thought. He caught every word. Every assumption, every moment of judgment. But he said nothing. He just sat there, morning after morning, staring out the window at the parking lot, his phone buzzing with urgent calls from Beijing that he refused to answer. His assistant called him every day. Mr. Zhang, the board is worried. The investors are asking questions. The Shanghai project needs your approval. When are you coming back? But William couldn't go back. Not yet, because 4 weeks ago, something happened in this small Montana town that changed his life forever. His son, David, had been driving through Cedar Falls on a cross-country road trip. It was supposed to be an adventure. A young man finding himself before starting his career in his father's company. David's car broke down right here in Cedar Falls. He'd called his father, speaking rapid Mandarin, excited despite the trouble. "Baba, you wouldn't believe how nice people are here. I can barely speak English, but they're helping me anyway. There's this one woman at the cafe who doesn't speak any Mandarin, but she made me feel so welcome. Like I was part of her family." David stayed in Cedar Falls for 3 days while his car was being fixed. 3 days that would be the last happy moments of his life. On his way out of town, just 30 miles down the highway, a drunk driver crossed the center line. David died instantly. He was only 23 years old. William had flown from Beijing to Montana within hours. But instead of handling everything quickly and flying home like everyone expected, he did something nobody understood. He checked into the local inn, and he started coming to Rosie's Cafe every single morning. He was searching for something. He couldn't explain it to his assistant. Couldn't explain it to his wife back in Beijing who begged him to come home. Couldn't even explain it to himself. But he knew he had to be here. In this place where his son had felt welcomed. Where David had found kindness in his final days. The waitresses at Rosie's rotated shifts. There was Betty, a grandmother with tired eyes who moved slowly, but always had a kind word for everyone. Then there was Jennifer, younger and efficient, but clearly uncomfortable around William. She'd set down his coffee without making eye contact, then hurry away like she was afraid he might try to talk to her. The morning regulars had their rhythm. Construction workers grabbing breakfast before heading to job sites. Elderly couples who'd been coming here for 30 years. Truck drivers stopping for fuel and coffee. Everyone belonged except William. He tried a few times to start conversations. Asked about the weather. Commented on how good the coffee smelled. But conversations died before they started. People would give him polite one-word answers, then turn back to their friends. The message was clear: you're not one of us. William's phone rang again. His business partner from Shanghai. William, we're losing contracts because you're not here. Clients don't understand why you've abandoned everything. But how could he explain? How could he tell them that his empire of glass and steel meant nothing now? That all his success, all his power, all his money couldn't buy back a single moment with his son? That he was sitting in a small-town cafe in Montana because somewhere in these worn booths and chipped coffee cups, his son had felt something that William had forgotten existed? David had always been different. Sensitive where William was tough. Artistic where William was practical. David had wanted to study music, but William had pushed him toward business. The company will be yours someday, William had said. Music is a hobby, not a future. Now David would never have a future at all. And William would give everything he owned just to hear his son play piano one more time. The coffee grew cold in William's hands as he watched the morning shift change at Rosie's. A new waitress came out from the kitchen. She was young, maybe late 20s, with warm brown skin and hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. She glanced toward his corner booth, and something in her eyes seemed different from the others. William felt a flutter of something he couldn't name. Not hope exactly, but something close to it. Her name was Jasmine Brooks, and she had learned to see what others missed. Jasmine had been working at Rosie's cafe for 7 years. She'd started here right after college, thinking it would just be temporary while she figured out her next move. But then her grandfather got sick, and temporary became permanent. Someone had to take care of him. Someone had to make sure he took his medication and got to his doctor's appointments and didn't spend all day alone in that big empty house. So Jasmine stayed in Cedar Falls. And she worked at Rosie's. And she watched her brilliant future get smaller and smaller until it fit inside the 4 walls of a small-town cafe. But here's the thing about Jasmine. She'd always been fascinated by languages. In college, while everyone else was taking Spanish or French, Jasmine had chosen Mandarin. Her friends thought she was crazy. Why would you learn Chinese? When are you ever going to use that in Montana? But Jasmine's professor, Dr. Lin, had become like family to her. An elderly woman from Taiwan who taught Jasmine not just words and grammar, but the beauty of connecting with people across cultures. Language is a bridge, Dr. Lin always said. It connects hearts, not just minds. 3 months ago, Jasmine's grandfather passed away. The man who had raised her after her parents died. The man who had believed in her when nobody else did. The man who had told her that working at Rosie's cafe wasn't failure, it was love. Losing him broke something in Jasmine. But it also taught her to recognize grief in others. That's why, on her first day back at work after the funeral, she noticed the Chinese man in the corner booth. Really noticed him. Not just as another customer, but as a human being carrying something heavy. She watched him over the next few days. The way he sat so carefully, like he was afraid of taking up too much space. The way his hands wrapped around his coffee cup like he was holding onto a lifeline. The way his eyes would scan the room, searching for something he couldn't find. Jasmine had overheard the whispers from other customers. The speculation about why he was here. The assumptions about his intentions. But Jasmine recognized something in his face that the others didn't see. She saw loss. The kind of loss that makes you feel like you're drowning. The kind that makes you sit in strange places, hoping to feel close to someone you'll never see again. During her break one day, Jasmine looked up his name from the credit card receipt. William Zhang. Real estate developer. Billionaire. And then she found the news articles about his son's death right here in Montana. Everything clicked into place. He wasn't here to buy up the town. He wasn't here on business. He was here for the same reason Jasmine had spent weeks sitting in her grandfather's workshop after he died, surrounded by his tools and his half-finished projects. Because grief makes you search for pieces of the people you've lost. This particular morning felt different. Jasmine watched William from across the cafe. His phone kept buzzing. He kept ignoring it. His coffee sat untouched, getting colder by the minute. His shoulders were tense, like he was carrying the weight of the world. Betty was supposed to be handling his section, but she was overwhelmed with the breakfast rush. The construction workers were loud and demanding. The truckers wanted their orders to go. The elderly couples needed refills. Jasmine made a decision. She picked up a fresh pot of coffee and walked toward the corner booth. Her heart was pounding. Not from nervousness, exactly, but from the weight of what she was about to do. As she reached his table, she took a breath. And then she spoke the words she'd practiced 1,000 times in classrooms, but never thought would matter like this. Zhang Xianxing, Nin Xiang Yaxing de Cafe Ma? Mr. Zhang, would you like fresh coffee? The effect was immediate. William's head snapped up. His eyes went wide. For a moment, he just stared at her, like he couldn't believe what he'd heard. Like maybe he'd imagined it. Then his eyes filled with tears. Ni hui shua zhengwen? You speak Mandarin? His voice cracked on the words. Such a simple question, but loaded with so much emotion that Jasmine felt her own throat tighten. Yidian, she said softly. A little. Enough to say what matters. If this moment is touching your heart, I want you to know that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness create the biggest changes. Stay with me, because what happens next will show you just how powerful it is when someone truly sees you. William couldn't speak for a moment. He just sat there, tears streaming down his face, not even trying to hide them. Here was this powerful man, this billionaire who commanded boardrooms and built empires, crying in a small-town cafe because a waitress had spoken to him in his own language. Jasmine set down the coffee pot and did something that would have gotten her fired at a fancier restaurant. She sat down across from him, uninvited. "Watingshua ni ertzi de shur," she said gently. "Waheni han. I heard about your son. I'm so sorry." Around them, the cafe had gone quiet. Other customers were staring now. Not with suspicion this time, but with curiosity. What was happening at the corner booth? Why was Jasmine speaking that foreign language? Why was the Chinese man crying? "How do you know?" William asked in English, his accent heavy with emotion. "I lost my grandfather 3 months ago," Jasmine replied, switching between Mandarin and English. "I know the look of someone trying to find pieces of someone they loved." William pulled out his phone with shaking hands. He showed her a photo. A young man with a bright smile, standing in front of a mountain vista. "This is David. My son. He was here. In this town. He called me. He said." His voice broke. Jasmine waited, patient and kind. "He said the people here made him feel like family." Jasmine studied the photo of David Zhang. A young man who looked so much like his father, but with softer eyes. Gentler. The kind of person who smiled easily. "Mrs. Patterson at the gas station mentioned a young Chinese man a few weeks ago," Jasmine said thoughtfully, still speaking in Mandarin. "She said he tried to help her carry supplies, even though they couldn't talk to each other. That he drew pictures to communicate. Was that your son?" William nodded, unable to speak. He pulled up another photo. This one showed David sitting at a piano, his fingers on the keys, completely lost in the music. "He wanted to be a musician," William said quietly. "But I told him no. I told him he had to take over my company. That music was a waste of his talents." His voice dropped to a whisper. "I was so wrong." Jasmine reached across the table and touched his hand gently. A small gesture, but it meant everything. "You're here because you want to understand what he felt in this place," she said. It wasn't a question. "You want to feel close to him." "Yes," William breathed. "But I don't know how. I've been coming here for 4 weeks. Nobody talks to me. Nobody sees me. And I'm starting to think maybe David's kindness, his ability to connect with people, maybe he didn't get that from me. Maybe I don't have that gift." "Mr. Zhang," Jasmine said firmly, "you flew halfway around the world, and you've been sitting in this cafe for 4 weeks, waiting to feel close to your son. That's not a lack of love. That's the deepest love there is." Around them, the breakfast crowd had stopped pretending not to listen. Betty had abandoned her coffee pot to stand near the counter. Jennifer had paused mid-order. The construction workers had stopped their usual joking. Even Frank, the cook, had his head poking out of the kitchen window. Jasmine looked around at all of them. Then she made a decision that would change everything. She stood up and addressed the room in clear English, her voice carrying to every corner of the cafe. "Everyone, I need you to listen to me. This is William Zhang. For weeks ago, his son David was stranded here when his car broke down. David spent 3 days in Cedar Falls. He called his father and told him how kind everyone was, how welcomed he felt. The room was completely silent now. 2 days after David left town, he died in a car accident on the highway. He was 23 years old." Jasmine heard someone gasp. Saw Betty's hand fly to her mouth. "Mr. Zhang has been coming here every single morning since then," Jasmine continued. "Not to buy up our town. Not for business. But because this was the last place his son was happy. Because all of you showed kindness to his son when David was alone and scared and didn't speak the language." For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Betty set down her coffee pot and walked straight to William's booth. Tears were streaming down her weathered face. "Oh, honey," she said, her voice shaking. "You're talking about that sweet boy with the big smile. He helped me when I dropped a whole tray of dishes. Got down on the floor and helped me pick up every piece, even though I kept telling him not to worry about it." William looked up at her, his eyes desperate for every detail. "He drew me a picture," Betty continued, "of my daughter's kids from the photos I showed him on my phone. I still have it on my refrigerator." Frank came out from behind the grill, wiping his hands on his apron. The gruff cook who never talked to customers was walking toward William's table. "That kid tried to teach me to use chopsticks," Frank said, his gruff voice gentler than anyone had ever heard it. "I kept dropping the noodles, and he just laughed and laughed. Not mean you understand. Just joyful. Like he was genuinely happy to be there with me, even though I was making a fool of myself." One by one, people started coming forward, sharing their memories of David. The truck driver from the corner booth remembered how David had helped him fix a broken windshield wiper in the parking lot, even though it started raining. The elderly couple recalled how David had sat with them for an hour, looking at their photo albums, somehow communicating appreciation and interest despite the language barrier. Jennifer, the waitress who'd been uncomfortable around William, admitted quietly that David had left her the biggest tip she'd ever received, along with a note in broken English that said, "Thank you for patience with my bad English. You are a very kind person." Each story hit William like a wave. He'd known David was special, but hearing these strangers describe his son's kindness, his joy, his ability to connect with people, it was like getting to meet his son all over again, like seeing David through new eyes. The construction workers had been the loudest skeptics about William's presence in town, but now their foreman, a big man named Joe, came over looking sheepish. "I need to show you something," Joe said. He pulled out his wallet and carefully extracted a worn piece of paper. "Your son drew this." It was a picture of the construction crew, drawn in quick, skilled strokes. Each man was recognizable, and at the bottom, in David's handwriting, were words in both English and Mandarin. "Thank you for showing me what strong hands and kind hearts look like together." William's hands shook as he held the drawing. David had always been artistic, but William had never truly appreciated it, had seen it as a distraction from real work. "He saw the best in people," William said, his voice breaking. "He saw what I've spent my whole life too busy to notice." Jasmine squeezed his shoulder gently. "Then maybe that's what he came here to teach you. Not in some mystical way, but in a real way. He saw the kindness in this town because he was looking for it. And now you can see it too. If you're feeling the weight of this moment, I want you to stay with me, because what happens next shows us that healing doesn't happen alone. It happens when a community decides to open their hearts." After that morning, everything changed. William stopped being the stranger in the corner. Within days, he became part of the rhythm of Rosie's cafe. Betty insisted he try the apple pie that David had loved. "Your son ate 3 pieces, she said, laughing through tears. Said it was the best thing he'd ever tasted. I told him the secret was the cinnamon, but really the secret is just making it with love." Frank started teaching William how to cook American breakfast foods. "Your boy wanted to learn how to make pancakes," Frank said gruffly. "Said he wanted to surprise his mother when he got home. So I'm going to teach you instead, and you can make them for his memory." The construction workers invited William to their morning table. They showed him pictures of their families, shared their own stories of loss, fathers who died too young, brothers lost to accidents, friends who never made it home from war. Joe, the foreman, told William about losing his teenage daughter to cancer 5 years ago. "You never stop missing them," Joe said quietly, "but you learn to carry them with you differently. Not as weight, but as, I don't know, as light maybe, as a reason to be better." William found himself staying at the cafe longer each morning. 2 hours turned into 3. 3 turned into 4. He'd push back his calls with Beijing, ignore the urgent emails, let the business run itself for the first time in his life. And something strange happened. The grief that had been crushing him started to shift. It didn't go away, he knew it never would. But it became something he could breathe around. Jasmine became his bridge to the community. She'd translate when needed, but more than that, she helped him understand the culture. The unspoken rules of small-town life. The way people showed love through actions rather than words. In Montana, she explained one day as they sat together during her break, people don't say I love you as much as they do in other places. But they show up. They bring casseroles when someone dies. They help fix your fence without being asked. They remember your kid's name and ask how they're doing in school. David understood that, William said. He understood people in a way I never did. Maybe you do too, Jasmine said gently. You just never had a reason to slow down long enough to notice. One morning, about 2 months after that first conversation, William came into Rosie's with a proposal. He'd called a special meeting. The mayor was there, the town council, the owner of Rosie's cafe, an elderly woman named Rose who was considering retirement, and most of the morning regulars who'd become William's unexpected family. I want to buy Rosie's cafe, William announced. The room erupted in protests. People thought he was going to change it, turn it into something fancy and expensive, price out the locals, exactly what they'd feared from the beginning. But William raised his hand for silence. I want to buy it, he continued, so that it can stay exactly what it is. A place where people matter more than profit, where a young man from Beijing can walk in and be treated like family, where a grieving father can sit alone and eventually be welcomed home. He pulled out architectural plans and spread them on the table. I want to renovate, yes. New kitchen equipment so Frank can cook without fighting with that old stove. New booths that don't hurt Betty's back. Better heating for the Montana winters. But the spirit of this place? That stays the same. Rose, the elderly owner, was crying. I've been so worried about selling. Worried some corporation would buy it and turn it into something unrecognizable. Not a corporation, William said. A family. Because that's what you all gave my son in his last days. That's what you've given me. And now I want to give something back. But that wasn't all. William had been working with Jasmine on something bigger. Something that would honor David's memory in a way that matched who his son truly was. I'm creating the David Zhang Memorial Arts Scholarship, William announced. It will send one student from Cedar Falls each year to study music, art, or any creative field in China. And it will bring one Chinese student to Cedar Falls to study American culture and arts. He looked directly at Jasmine. David wanted to build bridges between cultures. He wanted to prove that people are the same everywhere when you give them a chance to connect. This scholarship will do that. Jasmine wiped tears from her eyes. Mr. Zhang, that's beautiful. William, he corrected gently. Just William. We're family now. The town rallied around the idea. They planned a memorial garden behind the cafe where Chinese cherry trees would be planted alongside Montana wildflowers. A place where East and West would grow together, just like the community itself was learning to do. William's phone still buzzed with calls from Beijing. But now when he answered, he had different news. I'm delegating more, he told his business partners. The company will run fine without me micromanaging every decision. I'm staying in Montana. This is where I need to be. His wife flew from Beijing to visit. She was skeptical at first, unable to understand why her husband had abandoned their life. But when she walked into Rosie's cafe and saw the memorial wall covered with photos of David and stories from the townspeople, she understood. He was happy here, she whispered, touching a picture of their son smiling with Betty. Look at his face. When was the last time we saw him smile like that at home? William wrapped his arm around her. He was trying to tell us something. About what really matters. About how to live. I just wish I'd listened when he was still alive. But in a way, he was listening now. And David's message was finally getting through. 6 months after William first walked into Rosie's cafe as a stranger, he stood in the completely transformed space and smiled. The cafe looked beautiful. Modern equipment in the kitchen. Comfortable seating. Fresh paint. Photographs covering the walls, not just of David, but of the entire community. The daily life of Cedar Falls captured in hundreds of candid moments. But most importantly, it still felt like Rosie's. Still smelled like coffee and bacon. Still buzzed with the same familiar voices. Still welcomed everyone who walked through the door, whether they'd lived in Cedar Falls their whole life or were just passing through. Jasmine had become the cafe's cultural coordinator and scholarship program director. She worked with William to manage the arts exchange program and help students navigate the challenges of studying abroad. The first scholarship applications came in today, Jasmine said, handing William a thick folder. 23 students from Cedar Falls High School. 23 kids who want to study art, music, theater, photography. Things their parents thought were impractical. Just like you once did. William opened the folder with reverent hands. David would have been so proud. His son had dreamed of a world where people weren't limited by their circumstances. Where a kid from Montana could study music in Beijing. Where a kid from Beijing could learn American culture in a small town. Your son started something beautiful, Jasmine said softly. He planted seeds in 3 days that are now growing into something amazing. Through the window, William could see the memorial garden taking shape. The cherry trees were small now, but they'd grow. In a few years, they'd bloom every spring, pink and white flowers mixing with the Montana wildflowers. A reminder that different kinds of beauty could exist in the same space. One of the construction workers, Joe's son Caleb, approached nervously. He was 17, shy, with paint stains permanently under his fingernails. "Mr. Zhang," Caleb said, "I wanted to apply for the scholarship. I know my dad probably wants me to work construction like him, but I want to study art, and I learned some Mandarin online. Can I try?" The boy bowed slightly and spoke in careful, practiced Mandarin. "Xie ni ge wa jihui." "Thank you for giving me an opportunity." William felt his throat tighten. This was exactly what David would have wanted. "Your Mandarin is very good," William replied in the same language, then switched to English. "And your father? He's already proud of you. He told me yesterday that you're talented, that you see the world differently than he does, and that's a gift." Caleb's eyes widened with surprise and relief. That was the thing William had learned in these months in Cedar Falls. Parents and children didn't always understand each other, but love was still there, waiting to be expressed. Joe had lost his daughter, so he understood William's pain, and he'd learned not to waste time being too proud to tell his son he believed in him. The lunch rush began. William took his usual seat at the corner booth, but now it wasn't the lonely corner anymore. People stopped by constantly. Betty refilled his coffee without asking. Frank brought him a slice of pie. The construction workers waved from their table. The elderly couple asked him to settle a debate about Chinese history. William's phone buzzed. His business partner from Shanghai. But the tone of the calls had changed over the months. "William, the Montana project is approved. The investors love your vision for cultural exchange real estate. They want to build similar communities in 5 more cities." William had started a new division of his company. Instead of just building luxury apartments and shopping centers, he was creating mixed-use spaces designed to bring different cultures together. Community centers with language schools. Restaurants featuring cuisines from around the world. Affordable housing alongside market-rate units. Real estate with a heart, he called it. Building places where people could belong. "David would have loved this," he said to Jasmine during a quiet moment. "He always said I built buildings but forgot about the people who'd live in them." "You remember him every day," Jasmine observed. "Not with sadness, but with action. That's the best memorial there is." William looked around Rosie's cafe at the life happening around him. Strangers becoming friends over coffee. Children learning that the world was bigger and more welcoming than they'd imagined. Elderly people who'd lived their whole lives in Cedar Falls now learning Mandarin phrases from the kids. Kids who'd never left Montana, now dreaming of walking on the Great Wall. All because his son had broken down in this town. All because David had seen the kindness in these people. All because one waitress had recognized grief in a stranger's eyes and decided to speak his language. "I used to think home was Beijing," William said softly. "The city where I was born, where I built my empire. But David taught me something. Home isn't where you're from. Home is where people remember your name, where they save you your favorite booth, where they care about your story." Jasmine smiled. "Dr. Lin used to tell me that language is a bridge. But I think connection is the bridge. Language is just one tool for building it." "Your grandfather would be proud of you," William said, "using everything he inspired in you to help others." "Our losses taught us to see each other," Jasmine replied. "That's not nothing. That's actually everything." As the afternoon sunlight streamed through the windows of Rosie's cafe, William pulled out his phone and opened his photo album. The picture of David at the piano. His beautiful, sensitive, artistic son who'd tried to tell his father what really mattered in life. "I'm listening now," William whispered. "I finally understand." And in that small-town cafe in Montana, surrounded by people who'd started as strangers and become family, a grieving father finally found what he'd been searching for. Not closure. Grief doesn't offer closure. But peace. The peace of knowing his son's kindness lived on. The peace of knowing he'd finally learned the lesson David had tried to teach him. The peace of knowing that home isn't a place on a map. Home is anywhere people choose to love you. Thank you for staying with me through this journey. If this story touched your heart, I hope you'll remember that we all have the power to welcome the stranger, to speak someone's language, whether that's actual words or just the language of kindness, and to turn grief into something beautiful. Because that's what makes us human. That's what makes us family.